Misinformation campaigns. Please remember to stay tuned after this so that you can join the live discussion. The Untruth Initiative. The Truth Initiative was set up to address youth smoking. It was wildly successful with its original goal of reducing teen tobacco use in the United States. As of 2021, only 1.5% of middle and high schoolers were regular users of combustible tobacco. However, instead of celebrating the steep and consistent decline in teen tobacco use, they instead aimed their sights on vaping and nicotine.
Bloomberg Philanthropies revealed this morning that it's funding a new program aimed at ending the epidemic. The Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids will coordinate the push.
Along with the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, they expanded their focus outside of the United States.
What the Cabinet has given approval today is first a decision to ban e-cigarettes.
Specifically to low and middle income countries where the burden of unsafe tobacco use is highest.
No es posible que en muchos países que están al otro lado del mundo.
Reports say a French tourist was deported out of Thailand for possession of an e-cigarette.
In my country, vaping is not legal.
To the dismay of many public health experts, Truth Initiative has become an implacable opponent of vaping and nicotine, promoting disinformation to create moral outrage and public fear of nicotine and vaping.
Vaping can expose you to toxic chemicals and kill you.
Nicotine from e-cigarettes is addictive and can cause brain damage and cancer.
Exposure to nicotine from e-cigarette vapor does in fact cause lung cancer.
Meanwhile, the youth nicotine vaping rate amongst 10th graders in the United States has declined from 28.7% in 2019 to 20% in 2020 and 14.2% in 2021. What are they saying?
They can cause poisoning, toxicity through inhalation, which can lead to seizures, trauma and burns.
The disinformation campaigns that have been launched by the Truth Initiative, along with its allies, the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, the American Heart Association, the American Lung Association, and the American Cancer Society, go unchecked, as they are seen as experts in their field. But are they?
Are they safe? Are they not safe? In the headline this morning, they can cause cancer.
E-cigarettes are not safe.
So many lies, such as vaping is a gateway to smoking.
Teens who vape are more likely to be smoking cigarettes within a year.
Researchers found kids who experiment with vaping are much more likely to try smoking regular cigarettes.
As soon as I started vaping, I started having panic attacks. I thought it just affected your body and not your mindset.
It was making me feel less than who I was. My confidence was just dropping.
Vaping is the cause of teen depression.
Depression leads to vaping, and vaping increases depression symptoms over time.
Vaping can lead to memory issues as well as other mental and physical health problems.
Vaping will raise the risk of catching COVID and also making any infection more serious, some of which were contained in a study published by the Journal of Adolescent Health and made global headlines 2 years ago.
A new study reveals teenagers and young adults who vape may be 5 to 7 times more likely to get the virus.
The authors, after being called up by public health experts on the problems with the study, later clarified by saying, "Our study does not imply causality."
We know that e-liquids contain substances that are carcinogenic.
There are beginning to be molecular genetic studies showing that e-cigarettes turn on cancer-causing genes.
In the recent retraction of an article published in February 22 in the World Journal of Oncology, which claimed that nicotine vapors face the same cancer risk as cigarette smokers, the editors explained that concerns have been raised regarding the article's methodology, source data processing, including statistical analysis, and reliability of conclusions. The authors failed to provide justified explanations and evidence for the inquiries. Subsequently, this article has been retracted at the request of the editor-in-chief. Then there is the previous 2020 retraction of an article by Stanton Glantz in the Journal of the American Heart Association that falsely claimed vaping doubled the risk of heart attacks. This study, however, is still listed on the WHO FCTC website as a reference to guidelines regarding electronic cigarettes. Why does it matter? It matters because the WHO has used studies from the detractors, specifically the Retracted Glance article, as justification for their guidance to member countries to restrict, ban, or severely limit access to safer nicotine products. Sally Sattel, a psychiatrist and fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, stated, "We are not talking misinformation, we are talking disinformation. This is a willful misrepresentation of facts." David Abrams, a professor of public health at New York University, said, "They have spun and ignored science to cherry-pick only information and data that supports the ideology of prohibition." How is it being addressed by public health harm reduction advocates? Clive Bates, in his most recent article entitled Bad Science, questions, what is bad science and why is there so much of it? It has hit the nail on the head. He states, "I believe the answer lies in the incentives of those doing the science. Major U.S. federal research funders are aiming for a world free of tobacco use, which also means free of nicotine use. Tobacco regulatory science funded by regulators will be inclined to find justifications for regulation and intervention, not liberalization. There could also be deeper drivers. Without the significant harms of smoking, there isn't much justification for the whole field of tobacco control. Perhaps the emergence of a much safer smoke-free nicotine product threatens livelihoods, careers, and entire university departments, and bad science is the reaction." John Oyston, a retired anesthesiology and tobacco harm reduction expert advocate from Canada, has written extensively on the issue. In his latest blog post about tobacco control and safer nicotine products, he states, "It is time to move away from shaming and blaming smokers and away from stigmatizing nicotine use. It is more than time to address the issue with empathy and make reducing the use of combustible tobacco the priority, not the use of nicotine. As part of this, there is no one-size-fits-all, and choice access to different types of safer nicotine products is what will finally effectively reduce the use of combustible tobacco." How do we counter the disinformation? The war against tobacco has morphed into the war against nicotine. It has nothing to do with the truth, nor does it have anything to do with science, evidence, or public health. It is up to us to make a huge effort to educate our local officials, WHO delegates, and the public of the facts and evidence that is based on sound scientific method and statistical information. The detractors of nicotine and the messengers of disinformation. Theirs is self-interest. Ours is public health. Remember, stay tuned and join the live discussion. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Advocate's Voice. This is the first episode for 2023, and I have a panelist with me, so I will bring everyone in. First, I would like to bring in Mr. Samsul Arifin from Move Malaysia. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And then we have Peter Detour from the Vapors Philippines. Hi, Peter. You're muted.
Hi, guys. Good afternoon.
Hello. Next, I'm going to bring in Clarice Virgino from the Philippines. Hi, Clarice.
Hi, everyone.
Then I will bring in Paul Blamar from Australia. Hi, Paul.
Afternoon, evening, people.
And last but not least, we have Henage Mitchell from Factasia. Hi, H.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the people that are watching. Hi, Rog. I want to start with Sam because we might not have Sam for the entire live. So I have a question for Sam. This is what I wanted to ask you about is in a discussion that we had earlier this week, you were telling us about a situation that was happening in Malaysia, and it kind of highlights the paranoia that seems to be rumbling through the tobacco control field. So, Sam, up to you. Tell us the story of what happened to you.
Right. I'm Sam. I'm representing MOVE, the consumer group for vape here in Malaysia, and also the program director for Harm Reduction Awareness Association here in Malaysia. And we do advocacy work here in Malaysia, and obviously it is a non-profit, and we put our own time and effort and money into it, and we believe that this is a worthy cause. We do it because we believe in it, but of course at the same time we do have to take care of ourselves financially. We do not get any benefits financially from doing the advocacy work. Further than that, we have to put in our own resources into it, our time and money. So I do have other interests in regards to my business and my day job, so called. And I do have other few businesses that I run, a sports cafe and a digital marketing agency and such. So then I was made informed there was a program by the Ministry of Health, which is related to non-communicable disease. So then I set an appointment and I went to see the one of the two of the officers there at the Ministry of Health of Malaysia. And I brought in a proposal to collaborate with the Ministry of Health to launch a weight loss program. Okay, a weight loss program that has got nothing to do with vape or any tobacco products. And the proposal was handed over to them. And I guess it is somewhat of a formality when you do visit their offices. They come in and they take pictures and such. All right, so that was that. And I was just waiting for them to reply in regards to that particular proposal that we wanted to collaborate with the Ministry of Health to conduct a weight loss intervention program, right? Which has got nothing to do with vape. And then suddenly, I was then informed that my visit was in the news. It came out in the news, and and even more than that, my picture that was taken with the two officers went viral, and the heading of the news, which was all over the media space, was "No compromise on violation of Article 5.3 WHO SCTC by Health Ministry officials." Right. So then, my visit to the Ministry of Health with the intention to collaborate for a health program was then became news by them saying that I am representing a tobacco company, and without the knowledge of the higher echelon of the MOH officers, namely the ministers herself, has now violated the Article 5.3 of WHO FCTC. So then, as what Nancy was saying earlier on, I think the level of paranoia is somewhat ridiculous. And even in the news article was saying that I represent the tobacco company, which is factually untrue. And I guess that's the situation that I'm dealing with here. And even prior to that, there was a change of government. There was a change of the Minister of Health, and obviously we have to start all over again our initiative in regards to regulation of the vape products and the vape industry. And I was before this whole incident, before this whole fiasco, I was contacted by the special advisor to the Minister of Health. He wanted to see me to discuss about the generational endgame bill that they initiated by the last government. They wanted to revive that again, and they wanted to have our input. Now, that on its own was very positive. He reached out to me and wanted to see me, the special advisor of the new health minister. But unfortunately, after this incident, when that went viral, stating that my visit over to the MOH violated the Article 5.3 of the WHO FCTC, I don't think he'll be seeing me anytime soon. So I guess that's the gist of it, Nancy. That's what was happening.
You know, it's interesting to me because we've been dealing with 5.3, the misinterpretation of 5.3 here in New Zealand as well.
All right.
Independent vape manufacturers were trying to get a hold of our regulatory authority, our vaping regulatory authority, and they got bounced back because they were told that, under 5.3, they can only just talk to and discuss these things with tobacco companies. So it seems that what's going on with 5.3, there's this campaign for let's interpret 5.3 to suit our own purposes that has absolutely nothing to do with 5.3.
Right,
now, I know that Paul in Australia, there's been drama over there with this as well. Paul,
even before that, can I just add on one more point?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is important and it's very damaging to our progress here in Malaysia. I was informed there's a circulation of internal letters within the Ministry of Health stating that I am barred from entering MOH unless I am invited by the Minister of Health herself. So that's where we are at right now.
Yeah, it's the paranoia. I mean, and it's ramping up, and obviously it's a copier. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I still think about that. I'm just like, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. I would like to switch to, Paul's just shaking his head no. So I would like to switch to H as he sits there and he's drinking something. Hello. Hi, H. Unmute. You're muted. You're muted. Now, what's your take on all of this?
Well, it's not surprising. I think we've been the target for the anti-THR brigade for a long time. I think it's, as I say, it's not unsurprising. They do say that as one door closes, another one opens, and I would reiterate what I've said numerous times, which is that if the Department of Health is locked into bad science, rhetoric, and moralistic prohibitionist dogma, and is using the flawed science that they do, retracted studies that are not peer-reviewed, studies that just don't stand up to any scrutiny, and which are completely blasted out of the water by studies by independent, peer-reviewed researchers who are highly qualified. If the Department of Health wants to use that to justify their position, then dealings with regulators have to point out that this information that they're providing is an opinion. It is not backed up by any evidence. The evidence that they have come up with is flawed and highly contentious. If this was a court of law, the case would be thrown out because the evidence is clearly insufficient. And highly contentious. There's a lot of other evidence there. So consequently, if you're talking to DOH as a regulator, the onus is on the DOH actually to prove what they're saying, and they can't. Consequently, there's a lot of other stakeholders with skin in the game. There's the Department of Trade and Industry. There's the Bureau of Revenue. There's the Customs Department, there's the Tourist Department. They've all got a skin in the game, and they all may have different attitudes on how vaping, tobacco harm reduced products could bolster the economy, could lead small businesses to some kind of success, could look at export markets and so on and so forth. So the Department of Health's position is invariably in every country in this region, and pretty much most countries, is totally beholden to the WHO's rhetoric. They don't bother to do research. They just don't need to, because the WHO has told them to do this. Consequently, I think it's time, way past time, that we just stop walking in the Department of Health. They're not going to change their mind. They're bought and paid for. We need to be addressing this with other government departments and finding regulators, politicians who are actually got a logic vein in them, who understand rational debate, reason, facts, evidence. You don't need to be a scientist to understand that if you've got 3/4 of the research that says this is 95% safer and has all been peer reviewed, and 25% or less that says it's not, and it's not been peer reviewed and it's been retracted. I think we know which way the science is going. It's just we're not being presented with it by the Department of Health. So it's up to us to present the correct science, the full spectrum of it, to regulators, and to encourage government officials to talk to other departments of the Department of Health. And that's what I've got to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, and there's another thing too, and this is Paul, you're definitely gonna have to answer this one, okay? Because this happened in Australia. Is that, now they've gotten to the point, and I'm getting the paranoia, I'm still on paranoia thread here. They've gotten to the point where people who are doing independent analysis of science and presenting it, if any of that science contains anything that they consider dubious because of funding, they go after and they attack people. Now, Paul, this happened in Australia. I want you to give everybody an update of what happened there, please.
Okay, that's quite easy to, put into words. A few days ago, the Australian, a newspaper here in Australia, tore apart a lot of the submissions that have just been put in for another consultation period. And they're specifically going after two of our biggest advocates, one being Dr. Alex Wodak and the other one being Dr. Colin Mendelsohn. They claim that they claim that all of the science that's being done by PMI, BAT, JP, all of it is complete and utter rubbish, and it shouldn't be used or even put forward. Now, we've just been through another consultation period after the prescription model was introduced in 2021. Now they're doubling down and wanting plain packaging, nicotine limits, also flavor bans. It's gone from one end of extreme to completely out of control here. Anyone that's associated with the vaping industry or with tobacco harm reduction is now being tarred with the same brush that we all work for big tobacco in one way, shape or form. That's in it in a nutshell.
Tobacco harm reduction.
Here's my thing. How do we get beyond this? Because, obviously they're trying to silence us. They're scared. We know this. But how do we, using the kids, one of the things, I'm just going to have a little rant here. One of the things that's really gotten to me in the last couple of months is this children. And I'm sure we've all heard enough about it. Okay. And now, of course, in the States, they're hiding stats because the stats are actually showing that the youth vaping rate is dropping. Why is it that we as adults, do they consider us lost causes? So to hell with you, we don't care what happens to you. How do we get around that and make the average person understand that what's happening to us is something that could happen to them? It might not be tobacco, it might not be vaping. This switch, this shift, okay, from these people who are public health people and they're supposed to be responsible for us, it's turned into some kind of paternalistic thing where we're going to tell you what to do, and if you don't do things our way, well then, how do we address that? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I'll just chime in very quickly. I think the reason many of us are here is because we're passionate about something that's improved our lives. We're subjective about it. But if you look at the average human being, the concept of the human condition, we enjoy things that are not necessarily good for us. We all do, whether you smoke or vape or not, whether you absolutely think smokers deserve everything they get because who in their right mind would stick something in their own lungs. Coca-Cola, soft drinks, sugar, booze, fried foods, fast foods, all this kind of stuff that everybody enjoys. Jollibee in the Philippines. There's nothing healthy in Jollibee. So why aren't these antis going and closing that down? That's not real food. But they don't. But they will if we let them get away with this. So this is the thin end of the wedge. And I think it's important that we get the general public to understand you may not be a smoker or a vapor, but they're coming after us because of something that we started when we were kids. You guys started eating chocolates and candies and chips and all this stuff when you were kids. It wasn't good for you then, and it's not good for you now. So how should we approach this? Should we educate people that eating chips and fast food is not good, or should we ban it? Which one should we do? If it was your choices that are now on the block, how would you feel about it? So we need to get some kind of synergy and sympathy and, get people to understand we're human beings too. Okay.
Yeah.
We're not monsters because we started smoking. I think everybody in this room started smoking when they were kids. I know I did. I was 9 when somebody gave me the first cigarette. Yeah, great. And here I am, much older, 60 years on, and I don't smoke, I vape, but I smoked for 50 years of my life. And it gave me huge health issues, and now I don't have those health issues. They're under control, thank you very much. If you switch from drinking soft drinks to drinking water or sugar-free drinks, you will see an improvement in your health. Everybody knows this. If you switch from smoking to vaping or heat not burn, you will see a significant improvement in your health. We know this, but other people don't understand it. So if you put it into context, if you stop eating white bread and start eating soda bread, you're going to see a benefit. You will feel that benefit. If you start eating white rice and eat brown rice, you'll feel the benefit. This is the same thing. This is switching from something that's harmful to something that's less harmful, and we all see the benefits in that. So putting it into terms that a non-smoker or a non-vapor can understand, I think, is important. That's how you're going to get the sympathy, if you will.
Which brings up another question, and I want to direct this one at Clarice. Clarice, in the Philippines, you guys now have a regulated market. They're working on the actual nuts and bolts of it. How do people in the Philippines, the John Q. Public or Joan Q. Public in the Philippines, how do they view vaping and how do they view tobacco harm reduction?
Hi. Yeah. So now we do have the vape law, which I consider ourselves very lucky to get to this point, actually, because looking at other LMICs in the Southeast Asia region or the Asia Pacific region, we really are indeed lucky. As to the vape law, I'm not going to discuss it anymore. It's very legalese to discuss it. But anyway, I think it is directed towards protecting those who would like to switch from combustible cigarettes, from smoking cigarettes to switching to vape. And I think right now, most people are still not that informed regarding vaping because for someone in my age, I do use a lot of social media and I do see how people react to what tobacco harm reduction is. And despite the fact that we do have the vape law right now, there are still people trying to spread fake news regarding tobacco harm reduction, and sometimes these information even come from doctors, from people who are experts, and you'd think to yourself, how is someone like a doctor say stuff like this? Because people would respect you if you're a doctor. People would actually listen to you heavily if you are a doctor. You have that kind of standing. And it's unfortunate that despite having a regulation which is aimed to protect public health, we still have people who do not really fully understand or absorb what tobacco harm reduction is and what it can do to help people. So, yeah.
Yeah, there does seem to be this great big disconnect, and I would say there's a wall, okay, and there's that wall in the media, and only certain voices get through, and it's only if they serve those certain masters. Let's put it that way. So we've got the disinformation, we've got misinformation, then we've got disinformation. I mean, and I personally perceive that as misinformation is you don't actually know, but you're just spouting stuff. Disinformation is you're intentionally spouting the wrong information. So we've got those two aspects that are happening, right? How do we counter that? And that's my question for Peter.
Well, that's a tough one. Um, I think we just have to continue with what we're doing. Um, just piggybacking on what you said earlier, the so-called experts uh, forces us or forces people uh, who does not understand the big picture to simply look at specific things using the tools that you said earlier, misinformation, disinformation, and all that, targeting specific groups or specific individuals. As like what Clarice said earlier, yeah, we have a law here, but we still have a long ways to go because not everybody understands it. Um, right now, most individuals here in my country, the Philippines, the way they look at harm reduction in general, the vape law per se, is just like this: what is being told them and what they read in the news. So I think what we need to do is make them see it like this. And we do that by continuously doing forums like this, continuously sharing the different studies that we come across to, like what H said earlier, those studies that has been vetted, peer reviewed, and real studies. Because if we have groups or individuals that follow certain commands by their so-called masters, to they themselves are looking at this. So I think as passionate advocates, it is our job to make sure that it doesn't stop there. We just have to keep on opening the eyes of those people, uh, a centimeter at a time. And we might not be able to do it during our lifetime, but we have to keep on doing it. Nancy, I think that's the plan that I can come up with to continuously combat that, and um, to be very specific about it is we have to answer the online or whatever messaging the other groups are trying to do, because if we allow them to do that, plus the fact that because they're doctors or so-called experts, a lot of people will take what they say on the face value. So I think we just need to continue on answering back and giving the people the right information.
Yeah, I agree. We've got a question, and it's from Mallory in the States. So this is very US centric because I don't think we've dealt with the issues that they have with the THC. But she wants to know how many figures include THC vaping under nicotine vaping. She's saying, we know a lot can't seem to separate the two. How many on the panel have Colin's book, Stop Smoking, Start Vaping as Facts for Your Government? Now, I want to address this and then I'll hand it back to you guys. Yeah, there's Paul, of course, Australian. I do have the book. My government doesn't need the book. But the THC vaping versus nicotine vaping, we don't have that big issue with that here in New Zealand. I don't know if they do anywhere else. I mean, hell, it's legal in Thailand. Whatever, we're not going there. So that tends to be a very US thing with let's break out the THC versus the nicotine. So I don't have an answer for you, Mallory, but I'm going to turn it over to everybody else in case they may have an answer for you. So anybody want to take that up?
They're actually misidentifying a lot of the devices. A lot of the photos that you're seeing, they're pulling them together between regular vaping devices and THC cartridges, but they're putting them all into the same bracket. And I think the figures, I think you're right there, Mallory, that some of the figures they're actually throwing in the THC data as well. if they find a device or a cartridge or a tank or whatever it might be, they're adding that into the same bracket. They're not differentiating between the different products. That's my take on it.
I mean, in the Philippines, do you guys have that issue as well with the THC vaping that you're aware of?
No, we don't have that much here in the Philippines. There was one before, but later on, it wasn't really, just really no connection at all.
Okay.
So not a big, uh, not really something that Filipinos talk about here in the Philippines. I don't know if.
I think if I could just chime in there,
Yes,
in the
please. You're
Philippines,
next.
if you were to say, "Oh, I've got a THC vape pen," the death squads would be on your doorstep within moments. So it's not something that you would actually talk about, and that would be the case in most countries. In countries where THC is now legal, which is some states in the US, Thailand, it's completely legal. But in the US, it's always been something that it amuses me somehow that the THC pens are endemic. They're all over the place and completely accepted. So in California, I guess you can wander around the streets vaping a vape pen, but you can't have a flavored nicotine vape. What? Hello? What? So I think there's a huge disconnect. Everywhere we look, there's a massive disconnect between public health regulators or so-called experts, bureaucrats, and public health. There's a disconnect between manufacturers and consumers. There's a disconnect between consumers and governments. There's a disconnect between regulatory frameworks that allow THC, marijuana, but ban nicotine vaping and less harmful products. There's a disconnect between the taxes that are charged on legal products versus what the harm of these products actually are. Indonesia, where the cost of a vape, which is not particularly popular anymore, is at the highest possible tax bracket for a cigarette. There is no incentive whatsoever to try to switch to something that costs more than the poison that you're already taking. There's no sense to it. So there's a disconnect in the minds of public of regulators between the evidence and the rhetoric. So it's a massive challenge. But I think if we recognize that those disconnects exist and point them out, here's a classic example of a disconnect. I'm going to hold my phone up to the camera, and this is.
I know what this is. Hold it. Bring it up. There. Do you see that, people?
That's
police officers.
Policemen who are implicit as a police force in shaking down people that vape because look carefully, they're vaping. Hello. Right. So my son was walking down the road the other day and he had a vape on him. Oops, there's a cop there, and he put it away. As he walked past him, the cop blew a huge cloud of vape out. I mean, it's one rule for them and one rule for us, and it's unacceptable. But I think pointing out this kind of thing just serves to show that the citizens of our respective countries, these people do this stuff, but they won't let you have it. These people will say one thing, but they're not actually talking about anything that's relevant to the issues, because what they're using as justification doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
Yeah, I mean,
So we have to just point out these disconnects and keep doing it. Say, does this make sense to anyone else? It makes sense to me.
I've got 3 statements here that we're going to discuss from the hypocrisy files, as a matter of fact. Number 1, they tell us there's not enough evidence for vaping and it's not around long enough, but here, take the COVID jab. Trust us. That's 1. Number 2, we're going to ban the safer alternative, but we're going to allow tobacco to continue to be sold. And 3, they're taxing you to punish you for not doing what they want, for not stopping smoking the way they want you to do. I think these are all very true statements, and I think it's so deeply embedded, especially the last 2 are so deeply embedded in tobacco control that it's like, David and Goliath. It's, you're just pushing effluent uphill. But in saying that, there's another thing that I have recently heard that we need to discuss, I think. And we've been asking for years to get a discussion around Article 1.d in the Framework Treaty, and that is harm reduction. Now, the word on the street is that they are, in fact, going to discuss harm reduction at this COP that's coming up in November in Panama. This is a worry, people, because if they're going to use the Australian version of harm reduction, they're going to be pushing for medicalized vaping and medicalized nicotine. Okay? And if you look at the rhetoric that's out there and you look at all the propaganda that's out there, the misinformation, the disinformation, it's kind of simple to see that that's where they're going to go. So we've got to figure out how we're going to counter that. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? H?
I think it would be useful if every consumer advocacy on the planet wrote to their respective departments of health and bureaucrats that are handling the delegations to the FCTC to insist that they put a consumer advocate on the delegation from each country so that we're represented at a country level at FCTC. Not us applying to FCTC to get in as observer, but telling governments that you're doing this, there's consumers involved, and it's all about consumers, it's all about us. We need to be represented on your delegation. I think that's something we could usefully do. Who knows? Some countries might even say, yeah, that makes sense.
They might. They might. I mean, do you think in the Philippines that will be a possibility, Peter or Clarice?
Definitely, Nancy. I think for the most part, even though there's a lot of consumer groups here in the Philippines, there are also a lot of business groups, particularly with vaping. I totally agree with what H is saying. It has to be a consensus effort by a lot of individuals to make that happen. And I think it's high time for us here in the Philippines, at least the leaders, with respect to the consumer groups, the business sectors, the PCIAs, and all the other groups out there to band together and to come up with one action plan to make sure that the harm reduction advocates here in the Philippines gets a seat on that table. Um, I think we can do it, but I have to talk to a lot of organizations so that all our efforts will be in harmony towards a particular goal.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, and I agree with you, H, and that's something that we're going to be pushing in our region. By the way, in case you didn't know, this is something that we're going to be pushing in our region in the next 4 weeks, just getting those letters out there and saying, hey, listen, you need to have a consumer on us because, on that delegation, because this is about us. I'm not sure how effective it will be, but I think if enough people do it and enough people demand it, it's going to make them think. Because right now, some of the things that we've been noticing is they are watching us. They do see what we're doing. They are paying attention to what we're doing. And the more that we do, the more scared they get. So it's going to be a very interesting endeavor to see how many of us actually make it to Panama with our country delegations. Mallory wanted to clarify that in California, you can vape flavored nicotine. You just can't buy it in California, so you have to ship it in. So I just want to clarify that. So here we go. When we're talking about the people that are attacking us and the people who are the messengers of disinformation, where do we draw the line between not getting involved in those arguments and carrying on and just trying to spread the right information and the right science? I tend to think that a lot of times they do these things because they're just trying to muddy the waters and get us off track. What do you guys think? Paul?
For the most part, they're trying to discredit anyone that has any knowledge or any sense, regardless if you're part of the industry or you're an advocate. They're trying to discredit anything that we put forward to them. Australia is a prime example. When the prescription model was introduced, it was a failure from the get-go. It wasn't thought out. It wasn't put together in the right way. No one from the vaping industry or tobacco harm reduction were actually involved in the process. I think it was a pet project put together by our former health minister, Greg Hunt, the now former head of the TGA, being Professor Skerritt. They're both now gone. We don't know what's going to happen with the TGA. And for anyone that wants to know, the TGA is the equivalent of the FDA in the United States. They control medicines here in Australia. Now we need to see what we can do here first and foremost, because I think a lot of people are looking to Australia and what the model has been put forward. The model's not working. It's an absolute failure. I think we need to go a little bit further, and I hope to be in Panama this year. I really do, because the pushback that we've got coming from government and from the health departments is quite horrifying.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, and I think as we have to, as adults, we fight for our children, we fight for our parents, we fight for all these things, but, nobody's going to fight for us. So we have to fight for ourselves. I mean, that's it. And just stay very focused and stay, on message. I guess H likes to say, stay on message. Stay on message. Okay. And the message is this, we have rights. You are not our parent. You have no right to tell us how we should do things and how we shouldn't do things. We have a right to harm reduction. We have a right to health. And just present that message in the best possible way that we can so that the general public understands they're coming after us today. They'll be coming after you tomorrow. I mean, would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's the thin end of the wedge.
Yeah. So as we start to wrap this up, I'm going to ask each one of you to give us just a brief statement on your thoughts on misinformation, disinformation, bad science, and we're in a copier. Where do you want to see us at when that COP is done and it's the beginning of November? Where do you want to see us at? I'm going to start with you, Peter.
To everyone out there watching and listening, there's a lot of things going around. All I ask is for everybody to listen. Um, Read everything, but like what my good colleague here, Paul and H and Sam and then Clarice said earlier, it insults our common sense to a certain extent. Don't believe everything that you said. Don't believe everything that you hear and that you read. Remember, it's your life. Read through it, understand. If you have any questions, if something's not, it doesn't add up, most probably it will not. So feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to, uh, give you the science that we have and engage in meaningful dialogue. As for COP November 1, hopefully, we see a lot of people in this particular advocates' voice to be there in Panama, God willing, with the help of everybody. We will surely work hard to make sure that your voices will be heard, not just any voice, but the right voice.
Thanks for that, Peter. That's good. Clarice, you're up.
Hi. So yeah, as to misinformation and disinformation, um, just like what Peter said, let's not be gullible. No, in just taking in whatever we read or whatever we hear on social media or wherever. We have to we have to keep on questioning whether these things that we hear and read are accurate. And as to COP, I also do hope that we get the proper representation that we need, like to have a seat at the table, because it is about us after all. It is about people, protecting people's rights. And I do hope that what we want to air could also be aired right from us, not just from other people, but from consumer advocates and consumers themselves. So yeah, I think it's a big challenge to topple down misinformation and disinformation in particular, but we have to be consistent in providing the accurate information and letting people know that this is something that we have been fighting for quite some time now, and that it's going to benefit a lot of people in the long run.
Thanks for that, Clarice. Paul, you're up next.
It's tough being here in Australia, where we've got some of the most draconian laws on the planet when it comes to vaping and tobacco harm reduction. Yes, we were a leader once upon a time, but now we're becoming the laughing stock on the world stage. They're doubling down on everything that we're trying to do here, from both the industry, advocacy, and science. They won't listen to any of it. All I can say is the truth is out there. We know the truth. We're part of the truth, and we're part of the solution. And this year, I think, because of COP and what they're going to be talking about and going over, I think it's time that every single member country of the FCCC and their delegates, they do need a consumer next to them that has been in the trenches fighting for years to help them understand that science is real. It's not bought. You can't change what has been found and how the studies have been put together. The science is real. We're real. We're real people. We're not numbers. We're real people. And vaping pretty much helped save my life, diagnosed with emphysema. Now, no puffers, nothing. I'm good to go. But please, to the rest of the world, do not look at the Australian model. It failed from the get-go. Failed as soon as they rolled it out of the gate. Please don't look at it. Please don't.
Yeah, fair enough. H, your turn.
Okay, well, in terms of how do you counter misinformation, disinformation, I think depending on how it's presented is going to give you some clues as to what the fight back is. But I think one thing is a couple of things that I think are worth remembering. Number one, we're looking for respectful engagement. We're not looking to have confrontation with anti-THR people. Let's just assume that they're misguided. We all have our ideas as to why this has happened, the funding and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, let's just assume that the people, most of them that we're trying to engage with, are actually want the same things as we want. Ultimately, we want to see an end to cigarette smoking. We want to see an end to the death and disease and misery that combustible tobacco causes around the world. That's what we want. We all want that. So we don't actually. The only thing we disagree with the anti-THR brigade, the Bloombergs and the rest of them, is that THR is valid. That's the only thing we disagree with. So that's our point. We have to keep hammering that home. When people start throwing bad science at us, then you can say, well, he says that, but look, there's if you go, I think CAFRA has on their website, perhaps Nancy can share the link, a comparison of bad science and reasonable science, let's call it that, where all the stuff that the antis are using is there, but all the stuff that negates that, and there's much more of it, is there. It's searchable and whatever. So that's a resource that can be used. But again, at the end of the day, it's politicians and regulators that pass the laws that we are all beholden to, and they pass them based on best information and best knowledge. They're not scientists. They're not going to look at the science and research. They're just going to what's been put in front of them. So as I said earlier, we're not scientists. We can't sit there and debate the science, and the people that we need to debate it with, being the regulators, they can't debate it either, because by and large, they're not scientists. What we have to point out is, look, you're being told this, here's what you're being told, that's that much information. Here's the information that negates that. The other research that's been done by independent people who weren't paid to come up with, the results that sit with the prohibitionist mindset. So that's one way of doing it is to say the science that you're being presented with by this group does not match the science that the other groups have. So there's clearly doubt there. So you have an opinion, but you can't back it up with facts. The evidence that you have is very flawed. So the evidence we have is not so flawed. But at the end of the day, regardless of what the evidence is, we're human beings, we're consumers, we're the voters, we're the people that have found this product that has saved our lives, that has improved our health, that has improved the health of everyone around us. I'm speaking for myself here. I wouldn't be here if I was still smoking. I'm vaping, I'm still here. Sorry. But that's the way it is. But there's millions of stories like this, millions in every single country where vaping is used. This is the principal leverage that we have. There are millions and millions of us. This stuff works for us. If you've got fears and concerns about it, that's fine. Make sure that what we are able to access conforms to manufacturing standards that make sense. But do not tell us what we can and can't put into our bodies when you're selling us, allowing us to buy cigarettes, which will kill us and which make you millions and millions, if not billions of pounds and dollars and cents and pesos and whatever. So from the point of view of a consumer approaching the regulators, the science is somewhat secondary to this is us, this is what we want, this is what we need, and it's your job to make sure that we get it and that what we get is manufactured effectively. That's all your job is, not to ban it, not to empower the black market, not to disrespect people that choose to have chosen to use tobacco or nicotine. And it's not your job to understand the science either. It's your job to pass regulation that allows us to have access to these products that satisfy what we want so that we can continue to have a life and improve our health. And you don't have to support us in your health system if you have one. This is about us. It's not about tobacco control. It's not about, ultimately, it's about us and the choices that we make and the decisions that we make and the things we do to improve our own health. We're not asking for help. We just want to have access. That's it.
Yeah. My take on this is people need to have the information so that they can make an informed decision. And if you're in the way of that, get the hell out of the way, because now you're committing a crime. You are, really. You have no right. Do we live in... Yeah, I get speechless when I think about it. I could start ranting, but I'm not going to go there because we're not going to do that because they just said we had to be respectful. So you'll notice, see, I do listen sometimes. On the bottom, I have a ticker going. The TAV live sessions are going to start up next month, and it's going to be Lindsay and Skip and myself. And we're going to have, for the first one, we're going to have Martin Cullip there. And the focus of everything this year is going to be COP10. So if you can, keep an eye out for that, because Martin is going to give some really good information about what you can do either as a group or as an individual, as a consumer, as an adult, okay, to fight for your right to have access to these products and your right to health. So I just wanted to put that in there for everybody so they can know about it. The promos and stuff will be showing up probably in the next 2 weeks. And last but not least, I want to thank my panelists. Sam, you're not there, but I'm going to thank you online anyway. Thank you to Peter, to Clarice, to Paul, and to H. Thanks, guys, for joining us. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for joining us. And we will be seeing you guys soon. So I want everybody to just stay safe, stay well, and we'll catch up on the flip side. Thank you.